What if everything you've been taught about success is wrong? What if the long hours, the relentless grind, the obsession with doing more are actually holding you back? Imagine playing a game where the scoreboard is rigged, where only a few of your moves truly matter, and the rest, just wasted motion. That's the unsettling truth behind the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch, a book that doesn't just challenge conventional wisdom, it shatters it. The shocking idea is this: most of what you do doesn't matter, not in the way you think. In business, in relationships, in productivity, 80% of your results often come from just 20% of your efforts, and the rest, a black hole of wasted energy. Yet, we spend our days obsessing over the wrong tasks, chasing distractions disguised as progress, pouring our energy into the trivial many while ignoring the vital few. Take the world of commerce. A handful of products make the most money, a tiny fraction of customers drive the majority of sales, and a select few employees are responsible for nearly all the success. And yet, companies still waste millions marketing to people who will never buy, launching products doomed to fail, and filling schedules with meetings that accomplish nothing. Why? Because we've been conditioned to believe that more effort equals more reward. A lie that keeps people exhausted, businesses inefficient, and lives unfulfilled. But here's where it gets even crazier. This imbalance isn't just a business quirk, it's a law of nature. You'll find it in wealth distribution, in the way cities grow, in the very structure of the internet. A small fraction dominates, while the rest barely register. The few shape the many. The minority drives the majority. It's everywhere. The problem? Most people never see it. They stay trapped in the illusion of equality, assuming that all actions, all hours, all customers, all opportunities are worth the same. They aren't. And the moment you wake up to this reality, everything changes. The way you work, the way you think, the way you live. Because once you understand that success isn't about doing more, it's about doing less of the right things, you can stop sprinting on the hamster wheel and start playing the game the way it was meant to be played. And that's what we're about to uncover. They say history is written by the winners, but sometimes it's uncovered by the quiet observers, the ones who notice what no one else sees. Over a century ago, an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto wasn't trying to change the world. He was simply tending to his garden. And yet what he discovered in that soil would go on to explain economics, business, productivity, even the very fabric of success itself. At first, it seemed like an anomaly, a strange quirk of history. But then, other researchers started finding the same imbalance everywhere. In businesses, a handful of customers drove the majority of revenue. In factories, a small percentage of machines produced most of the output. In crime statistics, a minority of offenders were responsible for most of the crimes. Over and over again, the same ratio emerged, roughly 80% of effects stemming from just 20% of causes. This wasn't just an observation. It was a pattern hardwired into reality, a fundamental law that governs efficiency, effort, and reward. But here's where it gets truly wild. This rule isn't confined to wealth, crime, or agriculture. It extends into nature itself. A small fraction of trees in a forest dominate the canopy, absorbing most of the sunlight while the rest fight for scraps. A tiny number of genes in the human body control the majority of biological functions. Even in music, a few artists capture most of the world's attention while the rest struggle for recognition. Yet despite this overwhelming evidence, society teaches the opposite. We're told that equal effort brings equal reward, that hard work alone is the key to success, that every opportunity, every customer, every hour we put in should be treated the same. But Pareto's discovery obliterates that illusion. The world doesn't distribute outcomes evenly. It never has. It never will. And this raises a powerful question. If 80% of results come from just 20% of effort, what happens if you stop wasting time on the rest? If success is about leverage, about finding the small actions that produce the biggest impact, what would your life, your business, your finances look like if you focused only on what truly mattered? Pareto's insight remained buried in economics textbooks for decades. But when modern business thinkers rediscovered it, they realized it was more than just an interesting statistic. It was a cheat code for success. And as you're about to see, those who understand it don't just work less and achieve more. They change the game entirely. Imagine you're filling a glass with water. You turn on the tap, and at first the water flows smoothly, but then you start adding more and more pressure, expecting the glass to fill up faster. Instead, the water splashes over the sides, making a mess. More effort doesn't always mean better results. In fact, sometimes it backfires. This is the fundamental truth behind the 80-20 rule, a truth that contradicts everything we've been conditioned to believe. We're taught that effort and reward go hand in hand, that doubling down on work automatically leads to twice the outcome. But in reality, the world doesn't operate in straight lines. It moves in curves, imbalances, and disproportionate returns. The reason the 80-20 principle works is because success, whether in business, productivity, or life, is not evenly distributed. A tiny percentage of actions drive the majority of outcomes. A few key customers generate most of a company's revenue. A handful of decisions define the course of an entire career. And a small fraction of habits determine whether someone becomes wealthy, successful, or stuck in mediocrity. But why? What causes this massive imbalance? The answer lies in two powerful forces: leverage and feedback loops. First, leverage. Not all inputs create equal outputs. Consider a skilled investor. They don't buy 100 random stocks and hope for the best. They focus on a handful of high-value opportunities, the ones that will yield exponential returns. The same applies to time management. The world's most successful people aren't working 10x harder than everyone else. They're focusing on the 10x tasks, the high-leverage moves that create compounding benefits. Then there's feedback loops. Small advantages, when applied strategically, create outsized results. A company with a great product doesn't just grow steadily. It attracts the best customers, which leads to better reviews, which attracts even more customers. A writer who masters a niche doesn't just gain readers. They build authority, which attracts bigger opportunities, Tesla, which leads to more influence. Success is rarely linear. It accelerates or it stagnates. Now let's get practical. Imagine two people trying to lose weight. One spends hours every day doing random exercises with no structure, cutting calories without tracking results, hoping that sheer effort will eventually work. The other, they focus on just a few key moves. They identify the highest impact exercises, compound movements like squats and deadlifts. They optimize their diet by cutting processed foods and adding protein. They track progress, refine, and adjust. In 6 months, one person looks completely different. The other is still spinning their wheels. The 80-20 rule works because it forces you to think differently. It shifts the focus from doing more to doing what actually matters. It reveals hidden inefficiencies, showing you where effort is wasted and where small adjustments can yield disproportionate rewards. It forces the uncomfortable but liberating realization that most things don't matter, but the few that do matter exponentially. And this isn't just about work or fitness, it applies to everything. Relationships, money, learning, even happiness. A small fraction of friendships bring most of life's joy. A tiny percentage of purchases lead to most financial stress. A select few experiences create the most meaningful memories. The challenge isn't just understanding this principle, it's acting on it. Most people won't. They'll continue pouring time into things that don't move the needle, chasing distractions disguised as opportunities, mistaking motion for progress. But those who do embrace the 80-20 mindset, they stop playing the game the way they were told to and start playing it the way it actually works. And that changes everything. We've been lied to. From childhood, we're taught that success is a numbers game, that the more hours you work, the more money you make, the harder you push, the further you'll go. Hustle culture glorifies exhaustion. Sacrifice is seen as a badge of honor. But what if the entire system is broken? What if the most successful people aren't working harder than everyone else, but simply working differently? That's the paradox of the 80-20 principle. It's not about laziness, it's about precision. The world's highest achievers don't brute force their way to the top. They identify the few key moves that drive the biggest impact and ignore everything else. Look at business. The best entrepreneurs don't run around putting out every fire. They focus on the 20% of decisions that dictate 80% of their company's success. Which products bring in the most revenue? Which customers are worth the most time? Which marketing channels deliver the highest return? Instead of trying to do everything, they cut ruthlessly and optimize relentlessly. Now, let's talk about time. Most people live in reaction mode. They answer emails the moment they arrive, jump from task to task, and confuse being busy with being productive. But the 80-20 mindset flips this upside down. Instead of doing more, you do less, but with greater intensity. You identify the small handful of tasks that generate real progress, then double down on them while cutting out distractions. Take two professionals. One works 12-hour days, juggling dozens of tasks, constantly overwhelmed, but never making real progress. The other, they work half the hours, but spend that time on high-leverage activities. They automate low-value tasks, delegate what others can do, and reserve their energy for the moves that create disproportionate results. Who wins in the long run? It's not even close. Think about it. A single strategic decision can be worth more than 1,000 hours of grunt work. A single well-placed investment can yield more wealth than years of saving. A single key relationship can open doors that decades of networking never could. The secret to working less and achieving more is simple. Stop treating all tasks as equal. So how do you apply this? Start by identifying your 20%. What are the few activities that bring the highest rewards in your life, business, or career? What's actually moving the needle, and what's just noise? Once you've found it, ruthlessly eliminate the rest. Not reduce, eliminate. The biggest mistake people make isn't working too little, it's wasting time on things that don't matter. And here's the real kicker. Once you free yourself from the grind, you gain something far more valuable than money: control. Control over your time, your energy, your focus. You stop playing defense and start playing offense. You stop drowning in tasks and start engineering outcomes. This is how the elite operate. This is how fortunes are built, how movements are created, how breakthroughs happen. Not through exhaustion, not through endless hours, but through mastery of the vital few. The world rewards efficiency, not effort. And the moment you understand that, you stop chasing work and start making work chase you. Money doesn't play fair. If wealth were evenly distributed, if every business had an equal shot, if effort alone determined financial success, the world would look very different. But it doesn't. A tiny fraction of people own the vast majority of wealth. A small handful of businesses dominate their industries. A few investments generate nearly all the returns. And no matter how much we wish it weren't true, the 80-20 rule doesn't just apply to money, it controls it. In business, most products fail, most ideas go nowhere, and most strategies are dead on arrival. But the few that work, they work on a level that seems almost unfair. A mere 20% of customers drive 80% of revenue. A fraction of products account for nearly all profits. A handful of sales channels outperform everything else combined. Success in business isn't about trying harder, it's about finding these leverage points and squeezing them for everything they're worth. Look at any industry. You'll find companies that operate by force, pushing harder, spending more, chasing every customer, running themselves into the ground. And then, you'll find the ones that operate by power, zeroing in on the high-value opportunities, stripping away everything else, and making an obscene amount of money with seemingly effortless precision. The difference? One understands the 80-20 principle. The other is fighting against it. The same is true in investing. The vast majority of stocks do nothing or lose money. But a small handful, they explode in value, delivering returns that dwarf everything else. A great investor isn't someone who buys 100 random stocks. It's someone who finds the few that matter and holds on while everyone else panics. And in personal finance, the pattern repeats itself. 80% of wealth building comes down to a few key moves. Earning more, not by working harder, but by developing rare, valuable skills. Investing early, not in everything, but in the right places. Avoiding debt, not small expenses, but the major financial traps that cripple people for life. Yet most people focus on the wrong things. They cut out $5 lattes while ignoring the fact that their career trajectory, investment choices, and major purchases will decide their financial future far more than skipping coffee ever will. Money rewards those who understand leverage, not those who work the longest hours, not those who follow the rules, but those who figure out where wealth is actually created and position themselves accordingly. The brutal truth? Most businesses will fail. Most people will never build real wealth. Not because they aren't trying, but because they're playing the game wrong. They're spreading themselves too thin, focusing on too many things, refusing to let go of the 80% that isn't working. But for those who do get it, the game flips. Instead of chasing money, money starts chasing them. Instead of working for business, business starts working for them. The entire system bends in their favor, not because they're lucky, but because they've learned how to separate signal from noise, power from force, wealth from work. This is how financial empires are built. Not by doing more, but by mastering the few things that truly move the needle and eliminating everything else. Most people live their lives like a cluttered attic, jam-packed with commitments, distractions, and obligations they never stop to question. They rush through their days, answering emails, running errands, saying yes to everything, convinced that being busy means being productive. But deep down, they know something isn't right. They're exhausted but unfulfilled, working harder but not getting ahead. The 80-20 principle isn't just a business strategy, it's a philosophy for living. It's the realization that most of what we do, the meetings, the to-do lists, the endless obligations, doesn't actually matter. A small fraction of our efforts create the vast majority of our results. And once you understand this, you stop measuring productivity by how much you do, and start measuring it by how much of what you do actually moves the needle. Let's start with time. Most people treat all hours equally, but in reality, a tiny percentage of your time creates the majority of your progress. A few focused, high-leverage hours of deep work are more valuable than a week's worth of scattered, distracted effort. And yet, people spend their most productive hours reacting to notifications, drowning in emails, and multitasking their way to nowhere. Now think about learning. Most books, courses, and information overload you with trivia. But the real breakthroughs? They come from a small handful of ideas that change the way you think forever. Some people spend decades chasing knowledge, consuming content without applying it. The smartest people, they identify the 20% of insights that transform how they operate and discard the rest. Then there's happiness. Not all experiences contribute equally to your well-being. Most moments are forgettable, but a small fraction shape your life's meaning. The vacations, the deep conversations, the passions that make time disappear, these are the 20% that generate 80% of joy. But instead of maximizing those, most people waste time on obligations they resent, relationships that drain them, and habits that add nothing to their fulfillment. It gets even more personal. Your health. A few key habits, good sleep, strength training, whole foods, do far more for your well-being than obsessing over every detail of a diet plan. Your relationships. A handful of close connections bring more happiness than hundreds of superficial ones. Your stress. A small percentage of problems cause the majority of your anxiety. Eliminate those, and your entire life changes. But here's the problem. We don't apply this principle instinctively. We waste time, energy, and attention on things that don't matter because we assume all tasks, all decisions, all relationships are equally important. They're not. The difference between an extraordinary life and a mediocre one isn't doing more. It's cutting away the nonsense, the obligations, the distractions that consume your life without giving anything back. So here's the challenge. What's your 20%? What are the few things that, if you focused on them, would completely transform your results? And what's your 80%? The distractions, the obligations, the commitments that drain your time but give you nothing in return. Because the truth is, life doesn't reward effort, it rewards effectiveness. And those who master this principle don't just achieve more. They get their time, their energy, and their lives back. The 80-20 rule is a secret weapon, a lens that reveals hidden patterns of success, a tool that allows you to work less and achieve more. But like any powerful force, it can be misunderstood, misapplied, even weaponized against you. If you don't use it wisely, the very principle that promises freedom can become a trap. The first mistake, thinking 80% is worthless. Yes, most results come from a small fraction of efforts, but that doesn't mean you can blindly cut everything else. Businesses that fire 80% of their employees to optimize efficiency don't last long. People who ignore routine maintenance, relationships, health, financial discipline, because it's not part of the 20%, eventually crash. Not everything outside the 20% is waste. Some of it is the foundation that keeps the 20% running.